Peter, you might be the first person on this planet that has ever shut me up for this long. Good old Heraclitus, I tell you, that wild and crazy guy.
If I came to you and I gave you $10,000 for 20% of the company,
deal. Yeah. So, is that a verbal?
Younger than us, sorry to say, Joseph.
What, younger than 20?
Joe, we're just trying to help you because clearly you've lost control of the conversation.
I never, you know what, with all due respect, I never had control of the situation. Doesn't mean I'm gone. What doesn't kill me makes you stronger.
Look at you! You are insane.
How did I do that?
You're insane.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another day in paradise, another day of Corona TV, another day where my guest is nervous in the background. She thinks she might have to be singing karaoke right now with me and with myself. And of course, my good buddy. Remember, by the way, if you're doing streaming, if you want to point right, go left. See, my good buddy Plato over here, if you were wondering. That another wild and crazy guy. Let me shift up and give Plato a little bit more, he's just looking over. You see, I'm messed up. He's looking over my shoulder, keeping me honest. That's what I like. What are we going to learn? What wisdom are we going to learn from Plato today and my guest? Well, Tom Morris, the world's happiest public philosopher, is here, and he's about to meet the world's happiest practical philosopher, Cristina DiGiacomo. But before we do that, I have bad news for everyone. It is National Take Your Tree Down Day. It is National Take Your Christmas Tree Down. So have you taken your Christmas tree down yet? And you know what? Just like I said yesterday, maybe in 2021, we can, we can say Happy New Year until December 31st of this year. By the same token, keep your tree up as long as you want. Just keep it up as long as you want because, there are no rules. The only rules ultimately this year is for us to be happy. Now, I was on a show this morning. I was actually interviewed on the show, and the interviewer said to me, how do we follow you? The question is like, how do people get in contact with you, Joe? And I actually said, well, I don't really know. Like, I don't even know how to tell people to get hold of me anymore. What I am on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat. I mean, as always, I am Jaffe Juice on all the socials. But these days, obviously, I hang out and spend a lot of time with you on Corona TV. But I actually said to them, I don't know, why don't you, maybe I should just tell people to follow me on Peloton right now. So there are many, many new follows in 2021. There's the follow me on Peloton, be my friend, wave to me, I'll wave back, or we can actually video. I don't know if it's a narcissistic thing, but I like to video chat people while I am on the bike, while I'm in pain and doing my best. I find it very motivational. But between, I guess, Peloton and between Clubhouse, which I'm sure we're going to talk about with Cristina, these are the new rules. These are the new follows. This is where the new engagement lies. Mr. Steve Garfield says, hi, can we see Plato in color? Maybe not. I can see what I can do. Let me see. He wants Plato in color. I don't know if Plato ever was in color. Probably the best. I don't even know how I can show you my background, but we'll figure it out. We'll make something work for you, Mr. Steve Garfield. Well, let's get on with the show. And Cristina DiGiacomo is my guest today. She's fascinating. I can always tell it's going to be a great episode when I see the items that she wants to talk about or what's on my guest's mind. And so we're going to find out soon enough. Cristina is the Hump Day guest tomorrow, Neil Schaefer. And then our community, a small change in Friday's show. Diane Hessen will not be on the show, but a real awesome previous guest, Jory Desjardins, is going to be on. So Jory Angus, Tom, Mark, and Rohit will be my guests, and that will be on Friday's show. So let's just do some quick birthdays. One of the real, I think, pioneers in terms of social media and personal branding, Julia Roy, her birthday today, and my good buddy Russ Greenberg. Happy birthday to you, Russ. And LinkedIn birthdays are back. Who knew? For some reason, LinkedIn just decided not to wish anyone happy birthday until today again. So maybe LinkedIn felt that we shouldn't have been in the office over the New Year break. But anyway, happy birthday to Jeff, David, Salman, Jamin, Fayed. Have a great day today. Well, let's get into our seated soliloquy. And you will notice certain common themes today. But today's seated soliloquy is called The Emperor and His Clothes. Plato had it right all along, meaning he was right about what a good ruler should be. A good ruler should abolish ignorance, reduce factions, and be sound-minded, along with wisdom, love, courage, and desire. Now, that's a direct quote from my guest today, Cristina DiGiacomo, and it made me think of President-elect Joe Biden. Now, before I continue, this isn't a political soliloquy, but it is a contextual one, insofar that we are actively living through historic times, and I don't believe we are spectators to history anymore. Georgia, as it is literally playing out as I speak, has essentially shifted the entire political balance of power, but more importantly will be foundational for the direction, progress, and momentum of the United States of America, brand America, for at least the next 2 years. But let's get back to Sleepy Joe for a moment. He must have been asleep at the wheel when he decided to run for president, because, you know, his memory must have been fading. You know, surely he forgot or repressed the last time he took office and the state of the economy and the nation then. Now he's doing it all over again. Perhaps he's just a sucker for pain, or maybe a masochist. Or perhaps he's just one of Plato's disciples. Here's the thing. Accountability and transparency will prevail. They will be the order of the day when we fast forward at least 2 years and ask the age-old question, are you better off now than you were before? Call me crazy, but I suspect we will be less divisive in 2 years' time. I do not think we will turn into Venezuela. I doubt we will see Joe Biden played like a puppet or manipulated by the radical left. Police will continue to police. The majority of the people who so vehemently oppose Joe Biden or vigorously supported Donald Trump, pick your side, will benefit the most from fundamental and inalienable rights associated with healthcare, education, and assistance during tough, challenging times. This is not about politics. It's about leadership. It's about accountability. It's about the ability to stand up and be counted. All the spin, conjecture, and I think speculation will play out on the world's media and social media stage, where wisdom, love, courage, and desire will either overcome or succumb to ignorance, hatred, cowardice, and laziness. And should Sleepy Joe prevail, I humbly offer up his re-election campaign slogan for 2024, 4 more years. You're welcome, Joe. Well, as I said, that was not intended to be a political soliloquy, but it was something inspired by Plato and this idea of leadership, and obviously not just leadership, but accountable leadership. So thank you, Cristina, for being my muse and my inspiration. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Cristina DiGiacomo's experience spans 3,500 years. It's amazing because she doesn't look a day over 35. As a practical philosopher, she works with executives and entrepreneurs and teaches them the ideas and concepts from the greatest thinkers of all time. Part professional pep talker and wisdom dispenser, Cristina had a successful, award-winning 20-year corporate and agency career at companies like, you've probably never heard of them, the New York Times, Citigroup, AMC Networks, and clients such as Verizon, Johnson & Johnson, Sony, and L'Oreal. She began studying philosophy at the School of Practical Philosophy 10 years ago and counts Socrates and Plato as her inspiration. She holds a Master's of Science degree in Change Management from the New School. She has been profiled in Arianna Huffington's Thrive Global, Authority Magazine, Global Trade Magazine, The Young Upstarts, and Intelligence HQ. Her book, Wise Up at Work, was a #1 bestseller on Amazon for modern philosophy and a #1 new release and a bestseller in business management skills. She has a podcast, Wise Up with Cristina, where she interviews leaders about the issues facing business today. Please join me in welcoming her to the show. Cristina, welcome.
Yay! Hi.
Let me tell you what I loved about the bio is that you said, I've timed it, it's a 1-minute bio. And that was great. And I was like, 1 minute doesn't seem like a lot to invest in, propping up and celebrating my guests. So I was like, I'll do it. I won't edit it down. So if that was 1 minute, it was hopefully a worthwhile 1 minute for people watching right now.
Well, yeah. And also I was thinking about you. So when I was putting the bio together, I was also thinking about, being considerate of your time and kind of thinking outwardly as well for you and trying to craft something that, was, a minute long. So
well, I appreciate it. It was very, very considerate. Stephen Rubin is here. He is watching. And back to Steve, he asked if we could see Plato in color, but then he said he probably was in color back in the day and it just wore off. Well, I hope the background right now is colorful enough for you, Steve. And Tom adds, eloquent seated soliloquy. Plato is smiling. So faded Plato is smiling, ever more relevant and resonant today. So Cristina, we're going to talk a lot about philosophy and how it applies in life, in politics, in leadership, in business. But there were a couple of things that I wanted to get your level setting and definitions on before we begin. What is modern philosophy? Because you reference modern philosophy versus, ancient philosophy. We hear the term Stoic philosophy. And then what is practical philosophy? How do the two, modern and practical, intersect?
So I can speak more definitively around practical philosophy. Modern philosophy is just a literary category that I happen to fit in. But with practical philosophy, I think we should take a even further step back and really talk about what philosophy is. I get a lot of questions from people like, what is philosophy? They have some ideas about it. And they're not even really sure. So the way I look at philosophy is, the textbook definition is an understanding of our knowledge, reality, and existence, right? And just getting a good connection to what's real, why are we here, how do we know things? Over time, and my experience in philosophy and actually practicing it, I came up with another definition, which is it's a protocol for engaging the world. And I use the word protocol very intentionally because anytime that I have actually dug into Plato or Socrates or Emerson and all the greats, I'm always trying to extract not only the lesson, but how I can actually apply it in my life, which is where the practicality comes from. And I've found that philosophy can offer us so many wonderful rules and guidance around just how to manage our lives and how to interact with the world. So to me, philosophy, yes, is an overall understanding of knowledge, reality, and existence, but it's really rules for living well. And the practical philosophy is actually how to do it, how to apply philosophy in your everyday life, whether it's, dealing with that disgruntled coworker or figuring out what you want to do with your business or what you want to do in life in general or how you want to contribute to the world, all of those things, or even just get up early in the morning every day and get on with it. So that's how I define practical philosophy.
I love that. And it's also, maybe another synonym could be contextual or contextually relevant philosophy. But there's something I think that's really reassuring about learning from the past, not making the same mistakes in the future, but realizing how much incredible leadership and vision there was. And we'll get into that in a moment. But I thought we would do something fun. Well, this is actually the part that I call fun facts. But we're going to go through 3 interesting fun facts about you that really span your life. And I'm going to ask you in each case, which is, what was the philosophical connection or learning, if any? Because it might have just been completely superficial and frivolous. But I'm fairly certain there's going to be some meaning in each one. So we'll start off with the first one. And the first one is, who knew that you used to be an underground house or techno DJ? So is there any philosophical nuggets or crumbs or a little, Easter egg about to be revealed, bread that we can break associated with your life and career as an underground house or techno DJ?
Oh, absolutely, Joe. I mean, the philosophy of the dance floor really lends so many amazing things. My experience, being a DJ in the early 2000s was an experience and lessons in connection and in harmony among a group of people, and what it meant to actually be present. When you're a DJ, really good DJs are super hyper present on many levels, not only musically and technically, but they have to be super present to what is going on out on the dance floor. So being a DJ in and of itself is one of the most mindful practices that you can pursue. And that's what it really taught me, is how to be present, how to be mindful, how to be observant. Like, you become super observant of human nature and human behavior as the DJ and in that position. And then there's all these wonderful experiences just with creativity and understanding music and really immersing yourself in sound, and bringing different and disparate elements together to create a whole new track or a whole new sound. I mean, it's really kind of endless, the different philosophical things that come up just from being a DJ. But I really feel that for me, DJing was kind of my way to follow philosophy before I even started taking classes in philosophy.
You're 1 for 1. That was amazing. I see your next book already, the philosophy of techno or house or Peloton soundtracks. What about the next one, which is apparently you really love horror movies, and you starred in Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, who knew? And by the way, so what is the philosophical takeaway or the philosopher's take on horror movies? And before you answer that, what is your favorite horror movie of all time / and I use that word punnily and intentionally, what is the scariest horror movie that you've ever watched?
So first, my favorite horror movie of all time is a just mega classic. It's Halloween. It's, with Jamie Lee Curtis. Absolutely, just from beginning to end, just so, like, the story, the production, the direction, everything about it is just so tight, and it will always stand the test of time as a classic. The scariest has to be George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. And partly because of the experience I had when I first saw it. And I probably was a little bit too young to see this film. But I had been watching horror movies, by the time I was like 15, 16 anyway. But there was something about Night of the Living Dead where there was this hopelessness Like there was this idea that no matter where you go, no matter how far you run, no matter how much you hole up, you will never get away from this constant terror and imminent death. And to me, that was there was such an existential experience that I had with Night of the Living Dead, and it absolutely terrified me. It was like my first real experience with what it meant, what real horror was all about.
You know, it strikes me when we think about horror movies that hopelessness is it's, whether we like it or not, it's a vital ingredient. And typically, I even think about like how Nightmare on Elm Street and a classic horror movie always ends when just you think it's resolved, and then there's the knock on the door or there's the noise at the back, that it's like, you know, oh crap, it's not over, it's just beginning again. And it's one of the most annoying, irritating, but I suppose it's satisfying because it's what you've come to expect with a horror movie, that it's never quite over. You thought the spawn of Satan, or you know, Satan's child has been vanquished, and then you see another baby is born, and realize the circle or the cycle just continues. I don't know if there's a philosophical takeaway or a philosopher takeaway there, but you know, it's there all right.
Absolutely. Well, the thing is that the whole idea of it never ending, I mean, that's our lives, right? So just because, and to pull back even further, if you really understand horror movies and you watch enough of them, they follow the absolute classic hero's journey, which goes back to the Iliad, goes back to the Odyssey, goes back to all of those sort of ancient myths and stories that we, you know, thousands of years ago told ourselves around a campfire to make sense of the world and to help us address our fears and the scary things that were out there, whether it was Greek mythology, Roman mythology, pagan mythology, and those traditions. And horror movies are just a more contemporary fireside story that we tell to help us deal with, you know, the stranger on the street, the home invasion, the ghosts, all of those things, our own minds. And so one of the reasons why I appreciate horror so much is it has been a vehicle for me to work through some of those existential questions and get myself to somewhat of a cathartic place where I can say, okay, yeah, this thing I'm scared of, but I've already run through like what could happen, you know, and that also ties to a very stoic practice, which is to anticipate what the worst could be. And that's deeply rooted in Stoicism. And so there's these philosophical elements that I find very prevalent in horror movies. And also they can be a lot of fun and they can be scary, and you can, you know, you go back into your body when you're scared, and it reminds you how alive you are,
yeah.
You know, you're reminded how alive you are also too with really good horrors. So yeah, there's actually a lot of philosophy when it comes to horror.
Well, my scariest horror movie that I've ever seen, and it was probably because I was about 10 when I crept into the back and my mom was having a dinner party, was Salem's Lot. And it is still, to this day, I will not venture into any town, especially the town that it was set in, called Salem. I think it's Salem, New Hampshire. I could be wrong. But I will not even drive during the daylight into a town called Salem. I just can't do it. I can't do it. But, yeah. But now, we talk about resolving certain life questions. One of life's most unresolved questions, and it's a very, very important one, is how many times will someone attempt to bake bread before they finally give up? So the last fun fact about you, as I said, this takes you through your entire life from, you know, DJing through baking bread. It took you, I guess, 5 failures, but you finally did it. So was this your gravitational foundation? Did this anchor you during this time? The ability to say, I will succeed at baking bread?
Absolutely. So the first like 4 or 5 loaves were like the flattest things you could ever imagine. Like you could put them in a hockey rink and hockey players could play. Like they were hard as a hockey puck. And I was so discouraged, but I just kept trying. And finally I was able to get really great loaves of bread. And for me, I wanted to do this thing that people have been doing for thousands of years. The bread is such an essential component to food. It's been, and I just had this whole thing like I have to learn how to do this thing. And so yeah, I finally after several attempts was finally able to bake a decent loaf of bread. It came out good.
All right. Well, there's no doubt that, when we go through, as I said, your life, your career path, it's very clear that philosophy, and in particular practical philosophy, is prevalent and relevant and resident in everything you do. So one of the things that you posit is that philosophy is not just for the birds or for the philosophers, that everyone is a philosopher, and you say that you can prove it. So make the case. Tell us why everyone is a philosopher, and then prove it.
So this is just something that I've experienced going through classes, and then also TAing classes with students who are sort of new to philosophy. I'm guided by Aristotle on this. Aristotle believed that everyone was innately wise, that we all had have wisdom inside of us. And in addition to knowing that philosophy in and of itself is predicated on asking questions about ourselves, asking questions about our lives, asking questions about everything, really. And so one day it just sort of dawned on me where, and I'm going to ask you, Joe, like, have you ever thought about or asked like what you're here to do?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even forget about asking it. I answered the question this year with Corona TV.
Well, excellent.
And the interesting thing, just to lob it back to you, is I've said it in a self-deprecating way, both in terms of losing 20 pounds in 2020, right? Forget about COVID, the COVID-19. For me, it was COVID minus 19. And starting Corona TV, and I say it in that self-deprecating way, which is, did it have to take a global pandemic for me to reinvent myself, for me to find my purpose or my calling in life, for me to lose 20 pounds? And I say that still tongue in cheek, but there's something deeper there, which is, how do you reconcile that it takes this awful global pandemic to wake someone out of a slumber or to help them change course? How do you just embrace that without feeling that little bit of salt for the fact that it came at a price, maybe not for me, but for other people?
So I definitely want to answer that, but just back to proving about everyone being a philosopher. If you have ever asked yourself about your knowledge, existence, or reality, if you've ever contemplated what you're here to do, whether you've answered it or not, you have the capacity to philosophize. And my belief is that everyone is a philosopher because everyone has the ability to ask those big questions and are asking those big questions about their lives. And I don't want people to feel that philosophy is just for an elite privileged few. It's meant for everyone to engage with it. The original, the progenitors of philosophy were out there in the streets, like talking to people, teaching, really rolling up their sleeves, making things happen, and, really changing and revolutionizing the nature of our lives and of society. And so I really believe that everyone is a philosopher because they have innate wisdom and they can ask these big questions about their lives and the nature of how they operate in the world. So that's number one.
So before we even get into the other part, there's a key phrase in your response just now, asking big questions. So I guess the key part is the ability to ask a big question seems like, sure, it's in all of us, but do people take the time, and what does it take for people to ask the big questions and take the time to ask the question and put it out there, whether it's staring at yourself in the mirror, whether it's being the host of a streaming show, or whether it's just sitting around the dinner table with a glass of wine?
So this goes right to your experience, because the pandemic caused you to ask a big question of yourself. What are you going to do, right? The pandemic has really been in my opinion, one of the biggest catalysts for people to have that existential crisis that has been brewing underneath them for a really long time. And to your question about why does it take something like this, like a pandemic, for people to actually start to pay attention to having more meaning in their lives, or maybe doing something that they've never, been able to do, or something they've always wanted to do. Those are, to me, it's like, well, it's unfortunate that it took something this horrific, but at the same time, this happens to us all the time, right? You get fired from your job. And you're like, you know what? Screw this. I'm not going back to that career anymore. I'm going to do something new. That's not a pandemic. That's just getting fired from your job. Or you get divorced. Like, people are having tectonic shifts in their own lives all the time. There are things that are happening to people that are constantly reminding them, hey, you have to ask questions. You have to, make your life mean something. And here are the little catalysts along the way to help you do that, whether it's a health scare, all of that. So the pandemic is just happening to us on a global scale, and it's something that everyone can kind of understand and relate to. But we've been experiencing little mini crises in our lives for as long as we've been human.
Well, this is a little mini sound bite, or I should say video bite of inspiration, something that you've put out that I think also, puts these little bits of hope and positivity and curiosity and possibility into the world. I love that. So now I understand. From now on, I'm not gonna refer to it as the coronavirus, as COVID, as the China virus, as the UK virus. I'm going to call it the bamboo virus. And but I love that idea, of course. The essence of turning lemons into lemonade, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The what I love about that allegory is when you begin to cooperate, right, as opposed to thinking about yourself, you find new solutions to a particular problem. And that's really what the lesson of this story is all about, is taking a minute, thinking about what to do, and being a little bit more creative with other people to find a solution that benefits everyone.
Tom Morris says, we ask deep questions when the shallow questions have proved not to be enough. And he says, welcome to the show, Cristina. Thanks for what you do. From one philosopher to another. But
I am so flattered. Can I just say hi to Tom?
You can. You're going to probably see him in the after show.
Thank you.
You're gonna see him in the after show. And so I'll just let the two philosophers talk amongst themselves. I won't even give you a topic. But I will give you a topic, which is, let's talk about practical philosophy now as it relates to leadership and as it relates to the workplace. Because, and of course, another radical, Venn diagram as it associates with being a leader in the workplace. So let's go back to our pal Plato. It's amazing to see that. In fact, I think there is even a Plato Leadership Institute. All these quotes, right? The most important qualification for any leader is not wanting to be a leader. Wise men talk because they have something to say. Fools because they have to say something. What can we learn about leadership from Plato and from philosophy, and practical philosophy at that?
Absolutely. So I've been spending the past year reading Plato's Laws, which are his way of trying to provide guidance on how to have a good society. But he specifically focuses on rulers, and specifically focuses on what he calls lawgivers, which are really essentially people who are meant to govern the society that he's talking about. And he works through these ideas of like, what is the most important thing that lawgivers or rulers should do? And he's very specific. We talked about you talked about it, what I had mentioned earlier, which is reducing faction, right? Not allowing faction to happen at all in the society, meaning not allowing little mini groups to break off and start kind of warring with each other, especially in sort of the ruling class. The other thing is to abolish ignorance. So he also talks about the ruler being the educator. So constantly educating the society or the citizenry about what's going on, about why things need to be done in a certain way. Plato also talks about a good ruler or good leader having a preamble. He's really big on the preamble. So if you notice, CEOs that are really well regarded, they'll send like a memo or a communication to their employees explaining everything about why the company is doing a certain thing in a certain way. They're constantly, it's not just about transparency, it's about explaining things in a clear manner. And so preamble, educating, reducing faction and infighting, being sound-minded. So he really believed that a good leader was tapping into wisdom, courage, love, and a desire, meaning a desire for the good of all, a desire for the truth, and tapping into these really fundamental qualities of what it means to be a good leader, and being that all the time. And so sound-mindedness is just like constantly looking for the truth, operating from a place of, understanding, seeing things from different sides, not letting your emotions run away with you, not being influenced, overtly influenced in any way. And so when I read the laws and I started to take a really closer look at what he was saying, I thought to myself, I'm like, if a CEO or an executive were to just practice educating for a week or 2 weeks and getting out there, talking to their employees and, finding creative ways to just educate on what's going on with the company, or educate people on their roles, or educate people on the skills that they want to, move into, like that could be a whole new dimension for their leadership just on one trait. So there are so many other things, but making that real for CEOs and executives is something that I'm really passionate about. The guidance has been in front of us the whole time, and now it's just a matter of activating it.
I couldn't help but make a connection in what you said to your DJing, believe it or not. And what I realized is that truly to be an effective anything, leader, again, host, DJ, politician, member of society, you have to be attached to the audience. You have to be attached to the people. And when you spoke about being you see, what's like Dead Mouse, or you see like these great DJs, whether it's Calvin Harris, and they just seem aloof and detached on their stage, away from everyone. But they're definitely not, because they are at one and interconnected with that audience, and they are nothing without the crowd, without the dance crowd. The same can be said in terms of listening to a story, or being in an audience of someone giving a keynote, or ultimately being a leader and being connected to the people that you govern. And I think even the concept of preamble, which is a very original thought, preamble says that you've taken the time to actually manage expectations and sensitize, and you've done the due diligence to make sure that people have a better chance of succeeding when the thing begins, or when the grand plan is revealed. People even have an idea, they're on the front foot, they know why they're there in the first place. So that concept preamble, to me, is really intriguing, and I think it imbues and embodies all of these traits of servant leadership, of empathy, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and there's so much more to discover. Like, that's the thing that I really love about, reading Plato or Socrates or Emerson. Marsilio Ficino is another one of my favorites. Nietzsche, Lao Tzu. I'm really starting to get into also Gracian, Schopenhauer. Like, I'm starting to really expand. But the beauty about going back to these original thoughts is because a lot of them have been forgotten over time. A lot of them have sort of been lost in how we move on and evolve from a cultural standpoint. And so when you go back and you read these original words or these original ideas, new ideas get sparked. So for me, it's like, if you want innovation, if you want to be creative, if you want, the way I'm choosing to do that is to kind of go back to the original intention of these ideas and find a new power and a new essence in them, because they're still so relevant, and they're relevant for a reason.
Well, philosophy, I think, is so relevant and current in our lives. And I thought I would, you've mentioned a bunch of your favorite philosophers, but here's one more philosopher's quote. And I'd like you to react to it. First, you're going to have to tell me who said this.
Okay.
So this is a tough one. The world is calling, please pick up.
Oh, I said that.
So that was the great Stoic philosopher. I'm still not sure that that's correct, but that was the great philosopher Cristina DiGiacomo who said that. The world is calling, please pick up. Do not put it on the do not call list. Do not send it to spam. Do not ignore the call, but answer it. When did you say that? Tell us a little bit more. Give us a little bit more context.
Yeah, this was when I was having some really strong feelings about the pandemic, and I saw all of this play out. Like I saw the pandemic as a call to arms, in a way that it was finally a wake-up call. Like, that's how I looked at it. I saw that play out in my life, because when the pandemic really hit, I published my book. I finally got the book out the door. I started a podcast. I did so many things that I had wanted to do. And again, it was that catalyst. But I also felt like, I'm really a big proponent of trying to get people to understand that the world needs us right now more than ever. It has always needed us. We haven't been paying attention on so many levels, whether it's environmentally, whether it's socially, culturally, whether it's intellectually, so many levels. The world needs us to engage with it in the best way possible. It needs help. And so to me, I had this whole idea of like, the world has been calling us and we haven't been picking up. And so that's what was the inspiration for that quote.
It's also less about us, right? It's less about how can I earn more money? How can I be more successful? How can I be more famous? And more about what role can I play? Not the, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago, but will you leave the world in better condition than, in the same, if not better condition than when you found it? And so there's a responsibility and a call to action and a call to arms. So yes, you correctly identified that. Now you mentioned you've been busy. So you published a book, you have a podcast. Let's talk about philosophy as it relates to work and the workplace, because that has changed, obviously, just irrevocably. Tell us a little bit about Wise Up at Work. Manage with calm, navigate obstacles, lead the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So this book really was my way of explaining how I used philosophy and principles and practices in philosophy to handle some of the biggest challenges and issues that I was dealing with in the workplace. And so I knew that I wanted to talk about how applicable philosophy could be in the working world, but I also wanted to create a framework for people to be able to do these things and take a first step in using philosophy in their own workplace situations, or even from a leadership standpoint. So just a quick story, I had a career in advertising. And most people know that advertising as an industry can be really intense. And I worked in some very intense environments. And a lot of times I was in situations where I was feeling I was in conflict with a colleague, or I was in a situation where I had to work with an executive and things weren't really meshing really well. I wanted to do all these new things with my role, and how was I going to do that? And at the time when I was studying philosophy, I was taking some ideas like Plato's allegory of the cave, and and Stoic practices, and managing my thoughts. And I started to feel a lot better in these really intense environments, and I started to grow and in some cases thrive and have some success. So that was the impetus of the book, was like, hey, if I can do this, if this can work for me, let me show you how to do it. The framework is really very simple. It's really understanding, what it means to be a wise person. What people may not realize about wisdom is, I call it the ultimate soft skill. So if you want to be resilient, adaptable, collaborative, a good leader, have impact, have influence, like all those soft skills, I think there's like 15 of them at this point, or 20 of them, that are so valued in the workplace. If you ever met a wise person, they are all those things. They are adaptable, they are resilient, and so they have high EQ. To me, EQ is just wisdom. So my thought with this book is, let's keep it simple and understand what it means to be a wise person, which is simply seeing the truth and knowing reality for what it is, having the appropriate thoughts about that reality, taking a moment to deliberate what the right action would be for that moment or situation, and then acting accordingly. So truth, reality, thoughts, deliberation, and action are just these 4 very simple pillars of being a wise person. And so if you follow the practices that I have in the book about how to do each one of those things, then you can act wisely in your workplace or in whatever role that you happen to be. And then you are all those soft skills that everybody wants or that everybody expects from you.
So give me those 4 again. This is like the new Bohemian. It's not love and beauty. And what are the 4 things again?
So truth, I call it truth, thoughts, deliberation, action. And there's a hat tip to Barry Schwartz on that.
That's great. Well, one of the things also that's related to this is the fact that, I don't know if it's just a pet peeve of yours, but the fact that we've got to stop rejargonizing everything. What is rejargonizing, and how does that relate to wisening up at work?
Okay, so maybe maybe you could help me with this, Joe, because maybe rejargonizing isn't exactly the right word, but at a real macro level, we've been talking about the same things for, how to make a great workplace for decades. I was actually reading a research paper about leadership in the workplace, and it was a case study about this leader of this technology company who wanted to, management by walking around and really get to know his employees and etc. And after I was done reading this case study, I was like, wow, that's really great, awesome. And then I saw the date of that case study, and it was 1987. And I realized that even 20, 30, 40 years ago, we were talking about, what good leadership was. This is what Drucker was all about. And so for me, we're still talking about, do we need another study to tell us that a happy employee is a productive employee? And I just find these fundamental ideas are constantly being repackaged and repurposed and trotted out as this new revelation, when it's not a new revelation. And my concern is that if we keep renaming things and rejargonizing things and repurposing things, we're not actually rolling up our sleeves and doing the work to actually change working environments so they work for everyone. Look, I love the future of work, people. I absolutely do. I believe in idealism, and I believe in having a vision. But how can we be talking about the future of work and all these advances when the current state of the world of work is not working for everyone? To me, that's the future of work, is to create a system and a way of working that everyone can participate and benefit from. So I get a little miffed when we now have adaptability quotient. Nothing against the lady that came up with AQ, but do we need AQ? We don't need AQ. We need to get to work on making sure that everyone is having a good working experience. And that is what really, do we need separate books around different soft skills? Let's just keep it simple for people, because when you rejargonize and repackage and repurpose, you lose the original power of that idea. And then people have to play catch up. They have to read the book and say, all right, how am I going to be this now? And it takes focus away from what's really in front of us, which is a lot of work to make things better for people. That's my rant.
No, I mean, it's a beautiful rant, and it's a rant that actually gets back to wisdom and truth and love and courage. And actually, it makes us think about, and again, no slight to anyone who focuses on agile and agility, but ultimately what we really are talking about is some of these ancient and modern practical philosophy, pieces of advice, the golden rule, treating people as we would expect and hope to be treated ourselves. It's a little bit biblical at times, but ultimately I think it's about getting back to basics, as opposed to putting lipstick on a pig. And I was thinking, I just can't remember where I heard this, but I don't know if we were talking about like horror motels or like awful places we've been. But I don't even know if it was a conversation I had or if it was a show I was watching. But it was talking about you into a place where there's carpeting, where that is just layer on layer on layer on layer, and instead of like stripping the carpet, bare and then putting a new layer on, they just kind of recoat the floor with another layer, where you almost stand on this dirty carpet where there's no doubt, I don't know, blood seeping through or some foreign substance, and you're sinking into it. And what you realize is they're just they're covering up the problem, as opposed to uncovering, isolating, and then solving the problem. And I think that maybe speaks to what you were talking about.
Yes, and just as a follow-up to that, these fundamental ideas, these inherent truths are in us. We know courage when we see it. We know wisdom when we see it. And so when we keep it simple to these essential words, language, ideas, it's easier for people to connect with them. When we overcomplicate, or as your incredible metaphor of the layering of the carpet, it becomes harder for people to really engage with that and really wrap their heads around it. It makes them work harder. So if you actually want people to change, you can't make it so complicated that they can't engage with the idea, the fundamental idea. That's why these original words and principles are there for a reason, so that everyone can rally around the idea of love. Everybody can rally around the idea of courage and wisdom and all of that, and get to work and start living this way.
So wise up at work. Keep it simple, stupid. Keep it practical, stupid. Kips, not kiss, kips. Keep it practical, stupid. We've got just a few more comments. David Libby says, just bought the book. It's a must-have for 2021. Thank you. I have provided links already in the comments to buy the book, to subscribe to your newsletter, to subscribe to your podcast. I will provide one more link, which is your course. But before I do that, two final comments. Tom says, from Socrates on, the great thinkers have reminded us that it's not enough to know the good. We need to do the good and become good. And here's one for you. You're getting the jazz hands. Janine Dalla says, thank you, Cristina. I hear and see a lot of great grandma W and your grandmother V in your words and actions. So I think that's got to be the perfect way to end the show. But before we do that, obviously, there are a few things to tell you guys out there, starting with the fact that we have a Zoom after show. And if you want to hang out with philosopher Cristina, we will be doing that in just a couple of moments. bit.ly/CoronaTV after show, bit.ly/CoronaTV after show. For those of you that are not watching live, do not go to this URL because I see you all the time in my email coming to the after show. Rather watch the show live and then come to the after show. You will be most welcome. You can follow Cristina on Twitter. You can follow her on Instagram. You can connect with her on Clubhouse. We didn't even talk about that. We can talk about that in the after show. You can connect with me on Peloton. Oops, that wasn't meant to be in there. You can connect with Cristina on LinkedIn. Most importantly, you can purchase the book, subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the newsletter, and wait, there's more. You even have a course, the Mental Detox course. Tell us very, very quickly about the course.
Yeah, so the Mental Detox is a 14-day course that helps people go from mental chatter to things that matter. It combines Stoic practices and philosophy on how to manage your thoughts with brain science and practices around reducing stress and anxiety. And really, essentially, it'll take you from frantic to focused in 14 days.
From mental chatter to things that matter. Well, one thing that I hope matters is to everyone wants to know, inquiring minds are demanding that you answer this big question. What is your New Year's resolution for 2021?
Yeah, my New Year's resolution is to tell the truth, always.
Nice, perfect, eloquent. I love it. From mental chatter to things that matter. It has been a pleasure to spend time with you, and I know that he has no doubt in endorsing you, the Grand Warden of Corona TV, Mr. Chuck Norris.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
There you go. We'll be back tomorrow with Neil Schaefer. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. See you on the after show.
Thank you for watching Corona TV with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. Corona TV is the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing. The after show on Zoom starts right now at bit.ly/Corona TV after show. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show at CoronaTV.show. And if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, text Corona TV to 66866 or visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.